there friends! Today's video is a bit special for me and my channel. Back in October, I reviewed The Queen of the Tearling, the first in the fantasy trilogy by Erica Johansson. I reviewed the second book, The Invasion of the Tearling, in December, and now I've come to my review of the final book, The Fate of the Tearling. So this is the first series that I'll have completed and reviewed in its entirety on BookTube. I will be making a kind of overall series review shortly after this, and I'll be including some spoiler-free and spoiler-filled plots there, because I can tell you right now, I have some mixed feelings about this that I need to share. But first, let's give an overview of this book. As is my wont, this is a spoiler-free review, but there are spoilers for the first two books. Fair warning. So this book picks up where the last book left off. Queen Kelsey surrendered her magical sapphires to the Red Queen in exchange for 3 years of autonomy for the Tearling, a promise that was made on the jewels themselves, meeting ghastly consequences if it's broken. Kelsey is taken into custody and is destined for the Moor dungeons. She's left the mace as regent in charge of her throne, and of course, he aims to retrieve his queen as soon as possible. Before Kelsey faced the Red Queen, she released the creature Ro Finn from his imprisonment in the Fair Witch in exchange for information on how to beat her, and now he and his growing horde are moving south, a terror to everything in their path. So Kelsey continues to have those strange flashbacks to the past, but this time she's following the life of Katie Rice, a teenage girl born shortly after the crossing, in an early version of New London, simply called The Town. The origins of the Fetch and Ro Finn are revealed, and Kelsey hopes to find a way to defeat what Finn has become through these visions. There are several plot threads that are finally addressed. The fate of the crown that Father Tyler stole away from the Arvath, the mysterious woman Brenna, who was close to Arlen Thorne, Kelsey's wish that the mace deal with the horrible underground world of child dealings in the creche, as well as the fate of several other characters. So the book itself, The Fate of the Tearling, is full of loss and hopelessness and struggle. Both of the other books also had very heavy and thought-provoking themes, if you can recall in my reviews, and this one was no exception. It's interesting personally for me because one of the themes of this book is something that I've often thought about and talked about with people in real life. Are humans capable of permanently living in a utopia? Can there ever be such a thing as everlasting peace and equality with human beings? It's something that we strive for, but is it possible given the unpredictability of human nature, despite having a system in place perhaps that's supposed to prevent or foster certain behavior? There's just a lot of little philosophical questions all throughout, posed by some very tragic and sad situations. In terms of how much of each of the three books individually I found engaging, this third book wins. I think if you found the pacing of the first two books slow, this one will go along at least a little faster. While the flashbacks in the second book were important, they didn't seem directly relevant to the plot of the book. The flashbacks in this book are. Everything is getting resolved and wrapped up. There's just less time available to waste, so everything happening is relevant to something else. Now, I loved the first 95% of this book. I was enthralled and I really wanted to see how this was going to end. And then the end happened. The last chapter, the last like 30 pages, and it was so WTF. I did not like the ending. I feel like Johansson reached this point in the book when she was writing and then couldn't figure out how to end it satisfactorily and decided to take the easy way out, in my opinion. It's bizarre and felt so incongruous with the messages this series had been sending up until that point. I can't imagine that most people who read this book actively loved the ending. Some people probably didn't mind it, thought it was okay, but I can't imagine that anybody loved it or thought that it was an exceedingly good ending. There are also a few questions that never get answered, which is the worst. One of those questions I've had since book one. I mentioned it in my review, and it's so disappointing that they didn't get addressed. Johansson just never answers some of those questions. I think she just sort of went with the, this is just the way it is, okay, approach, which to an extent is more forgivable, I think, in fantasy than other genres. But in this case, it's a question that even Kelsey herself asks, and like even just a throwaway explanation would have been better than the nothing that we were given. I can't say much more than that without spoilers. I will be diving headlong into a discussion about this in my series review. Suffice to say that the ending brought my rating all the way down to 3 stars from what might have been a 5-star book, the only 5-star book in the series for me. The book is for the most part great all the way up until the resolution, which was so unsatisfying. So if you've read the first 2 books, absolutely finish out the series. You've made it this far, and it's mostly good. If you haven't read any of the books, I would suggest checking out my review of the first book and picking it up if it sounds interesting to you. Then, if you don't like the first book, perhaps call it quits there. So that's my review of the final book in this trilogy, without spoilers. So it's mostly amazing, but with an amazingly ridiculous ending that I'm not very impressed with. So please leave a comment if you read this series or are in the process of reading it. Again, I'll be posting a video discussing this series overall and my thoughts on the ending with spoilers. And if you'd like to chat with me about that, then I'll go ahead once it's up. I will link that video in this video. So yeah, it's just, I thought the series was great. I think that the characters are really well written, and the things that they do, I think, make sense considering their age and their relationship. And it was great. Most of the last book was great until the ending, which is very disappointing. So anyway, I will kind of wrap all of that up again in my series review, but until next time, I will see you later, and I hope you have a great next book. Bye!